What if everything you think you know about demonic possession is a lie, and Lucifer isn't lurking in temples or churches, but within human hearts? The case was closed. No exorcist could explain what they witnessed. The girl's body appeared to levitate, her eyes burned with an amber glow, as if something ancient was staring back. The name she screamed between convulsions and dead tongues was one the church dares not utter: Hellel. The Light Bringer, apocryphal texts hidden deep within the Vatican's archives, suggest Lucifer never sought worship. His true desire was something far more intimate: to dwell, not in heaven, but within us. I shall make my dwelling in flesh and spirit, and where there is fear, I will be there. Fragment from the Damascus manuscript, a section forbidden from canon. What if the most violent possessions aren't caused by lesser demons, but by fragments of Lucifer's rebellious consciousness, scattered across vulnerable human vessels? In the 13th century, during the Dark Council of Toledo, monks reported mass demonic assaults in remote convents. The pattern was always the same: ancient Hebrew voices, burning eyes, and one chilling phrase repeated by all the possessed: "He still speaks to us." The church tried to bury it, but some priests vanished during internal investigations. Confidential reports describe the possessions not as attacks by inferior spirits, but as visitations from the original fallen angel. Why does the Bible speak so much of demons, yet avoid detailing Lucifer's direct manifestations? What was cast out of heaven may have found a new sanctuary: the human body as a corrupted temple, and the darkest possessions, the ones rejected by science, faith, and reason, could be scheduled returns. But one document found beneath the crypts of Prague may finally reveal the true purpose of the very first recorded possession, and why it may have been authorized. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments. What if the first demonic possession wasn't an attack, but a sacred permission granted from within the church itself? The document was hidden beneath a stone altar in a forgotten chapel on the outskirts of Prague. No Vatican records, no name, no founding date, only the crumbling remains of moss-covered walls and silence. Beneath the church, a sealed chamber marked with symbols carved by blade and the ashes of bone. Inside it, a parchment. Handwritten, the text bore a title that borders on heresy: "The Host of the Fallen Star." The handwriting was erratic, as if the author had written in haste or under a force trying to stop him. The language shifted between vulgar, Latin, and unknown, terms believed to trace back to pre-biblical rituals. The account begins with a young monk who, for weeks, experienced vivid dreams of a presence speaking of freedom, of the fall, and of a light that wasn't extinguished, only redirected. He began writing words no one understood, reciting prayers in a language he had never learned, and gazing at the sky as if listening to a voice coming from within his soul. The symptoms weren't the usual ones. There were no screams, no violence, only transformation, a strange glow in his eyes, a mysterious language, and an unwavering devotion to an entity he called Hellel, an ancient name for Lucifer before the fall. Soon, the monk began to draw others in with his words. He spoke of creation as a prison, of matter as illusion, and of a rebel spirit sleeping inside every body, waiting to be awakened. One account describes a chilling moment during confession, when the monk touched a bishop's forehead and whispered, "You carry him too. You just don't know it yet." At this point, the author of the manuscript, a priest named Theodore, reveals something even more disturbing. The monk was taken by 3 men who claimed to be sent by the high clergy. Yet no official record confirmed such a mission. They took the body, burned the records, and sealed off the monastery. But Father Theodore made secret copies, and before he vanished without a trace, he hid one beneath the altar, as a final warning that the possession was not the work of a lesser demon, but the first direct manifestation of the fallen, consciousness once known as Lucifer. In the centuries that followed, similar cases began to surface in distant regions. People who claimed to be inhabited by a burning light, by a different mind. Not infernal, but celestial, though disfigured. The pattern? They all spoke in the name of a fragmented consciousness. scattered among human bodies like seeds waiting to awaken. And that's where the account takes its final turn. On the last page of the scroll, there's a note, written in a different hand. The script is steadier, more recent. Just a single line, penned with an almost calm tone. Possession is not invasion, it is return. What does it mean? The text doesn't explain. No other known record mentions the phrase. But if it's true, then we're not dealing with entities trying to enter. We're dealing with something that's already here, simply waiting to be awakened. If this resonated with you, like this video and help spread the word. Perfect. What if possession isn't a spirit entering the body, but the awakening of something that's always been inside us? After the discovery of the Prague Scroll, theologians and occult scholars clashed over its meaning. The closing phrase, possession is not invasion, it is return, became the foundation of a dark new theory, that certain manifestations are not caused by external entities, but by the reactivation of dormant consciousness, imprinted into the human soul since the original celestial rebellion. This theory gained strength from an even older manuscript, attributed to Simon the Magus, one of the most controversial figures of early Christianity, condemned as a heretic by the apostles, but revered by occult circles as the first true initiate. In the so-called Codex Vermiculus, Simon describes a ritual known as the Mirror of Return. Unlike exorcisms meant to expel, this ritual aims to reflect what already exists deep within the possessed. The mirror is symbolic, but the essence is brutal. Those who undergo the ritual don't cast anything out. They reveal what lies buried in the depths of their own soul. Simon recounts performing the ritual on a young man with strange symptoms. He spoke in layered voices, knew names of angels not found in canonical texts, and rejected any mention of hell. Instead, he claimed to be a living piece of the light that disobeyed. During the ritual, the boy entered a deep trance. His body trembled, but his eyes remained open and fixed. Then in a calm voice, he spoke a single phrase. The memory has returned. According to Simon, what manifested wasn't an external entity, but a spiritual consciousness that had once taken part in the Great Fall, a fragment of an ancient rebellion, trapped in the human body as a form of punishment, or perhaps protection. If this theory is true, it raises a devastating possibility. Human bodies may be living prisons for fallen angels. Each extreme possession, each unexplainable outburst, each deep mystical delirium could be nothing more than a crack in the seal, holding these ancient minds asleep. And if that's the case, exorcists aren't casting out demons. They're confronting what's always been there. But how do you fight something that was born with you? Similar accounts appear in other cultures. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, there are reports of individuals who, upon touching sacred objects, collapsed and began reciting passages from the Book of the Watchers, despite never having seen or heard of it. The most disturbing detail? They all repeated the same names, Azazel, Sariel, Uriel, but one name always came last, spoken in a tone of reverence, Hillel. The same pattern shows up in the texts found at Nag Hammadi. Among the so-called Gnostic Gospels, the belief that the body is a temporary cocoon, and that the true spirit, the divine rebel, sleeps inside many. How many cases of possession were dismissed as madness when they were actually spiritual memories awakening? There is no definitive answer, only patterns. And when patterns repeat, it's no longer coincidence, it's a system. A brutal truth begins to emerge. We're not being invaded, we're being awakened. And once the rebel consciousness awakens, it doesn't go back to sleep. Subscribe. What comes next is even darker. What if the church itself hid the truth? That some possessions were never meant to be exorcised, but obeyed? As more possession cases surfaced, a disturbing pattern emerged. Some victims didn't act possessed at all. They behaved like oracles. Instead of screaming or blaspheming, they spoke calmly, revealing secrets, naming exiled angels, reciting erased doctrines. Their accounts were too strange to be accepted as real, so they were purged from official history. But secret documents from the Congregatio Pro Doctrina Fidei, the former Inquisition, tell another story. For centuries, the Church didn't just document these unusual possessions, It studied them, their patterns, their locations, even the timing of their occurrence. The oldest records show these events happened more often during times of doctrinal crisis, when the church's control over the people began to weaken. Why does that matter? Because possession stopped being a threat and became a silent weapon. During the 15th century, at the height of the Inquisition, records emerged of so-called spontaneous possessions occurring in regions resisting papal authority. In at least 4 documented cases, possessed individuals appeared publicly in ecstatic states prophesying doom for heretics and eternal glory for the ecclesiastical elite. Later, it was discovered that these possessed individuals had undergone secret rituals led by monks, affiliated with the Order of the Servants of the Light, an internal Vatican, dedicated to the spiritual manipulation of the masses. These rituals didn't summon demons. They awakened the dormant rebel memory already hidden within certain bodies, waiting to be activated. The church learned something powerful. Not every possession needed to be fought. With the right rhetoric, some could be used to legitimize divine authority. When chaos inhabits the body and the word of rebellion becomes prophecy, even hell can be used in the name of heaven. Confidential excerpt from the Scarlet Archive, dated 1491. This spiritual manipulation became an unofficial policy. Specific individuals, often those with intense faith or mystical histories, were secretly activated and used as tools of influence. In many of these cases, the so-called exorcisms were nothing but carefully staged performances. Their true purpose? To convince the public that the church held power over evil, when in fact it was using it. This tactic stretched across centuries. Some modern scholars link unexplained miracles, such as stigmata, visions, or mystical ecstasies, to controlled manifestations of the rebel consciousness, and the saints at the center of these events. In some cases, they behaved more like the possessed than the enlightened. The question that remains is both simple and disturbing. How many of the possessions we know were actually authorized? The answer lies scattered across suppressed texts, secret orders, and long silences. But one name appears repeatedly in these hidden records. Dom Lucianus Ferran, an exorcist who vanished in 1632, allegedly leaving behind a grimoire describing conscious possession, a state in which the possessed is not overpowered, but guided. The grimoire vanished, but partial copies survived, and in one of them, a single phrase reappears, repeated like a hidden mantra. When the body consents, the fallen light returns. Share this with someone who needs to see what was kept hidden. What if modern self-discovery practices are unknowingly reactivating the same gateways the church once tried to seal shut? After centuries of suppression, the spiritual rebellion seems to have found a new path: modern spirituality. In recent years, thousands of reports have surfaced across forums, retreats, and spiritual healing centers. People engaged in deep meditation, reconnection rituals, the use of entheogens, or even heightened emotional states, began to exhibit symptoms that not long ago would have been classified as possession. But there's one crucial difference. These cases no longer happen inside churches. They don't require exorcists. They involve no priests, holy water, or crucifixes. They unfold in bright, silent spaces, often accompanied by soft mantras. Yet they end with glazed eyes, unknown tongues, and revelations about beings that call themselves the fragments of the fall. Reports investigated by independent researchers from consciousness expansion centers in Peru, India, and even ayahuasca retreats in Brazil have confirmed disturbing patterns. During altered states, individuals speak of encountering a luminous presence, often described as an angel who lost something, or a light that was cast out. One of the most documented cases took place in 2016. During a retreat in San Pedro de Atacama, a woman with no prior spiritual background, at the end of a guided meditation, began compulsively writing in ancient Sanskrit and Hebrew phrases that challenged traditional doctrine. She claimed to be the bearer of a hidden name and repeated one word through continuous weeping: Hillel, Hillel. The most unsettling part came during the later analysis of her writings. Buried among the phrases was a precise passage from the Book of the Lamentations of Azazel, an apocryphal text never published in Spanish, which she had supposedly never encountered. Why is this happening now? Some theories suggest the so-called New Age isn't just reopening doors to the divine, but also to what was once exiled. The pursuit of deep self-knowledge, when done without discernment, may shatter the seals that kept certain ancient minds in slumber. Widespread ego dissociation techniques don't just heal trauma, they remove ancestral filters, and in doing so, reveal what's been buried. In the primordial layers of the spirit, what if some of our oldest memories aren't even human, but angelic and fallen? Kabbalistic tradition speaks of the Reshimu, the trace of light left behind after the Creator's presence withdrew. But what if, along with that light, an echo of the rebellion was left behind too? Several Gnostic traditions offer the same warning. The body is not the end of the soul, but the veil that traps it. And the awakening so many seek may not lead to enlightenment, but to a reunion with an essence sealed away ages ago, for reasons we still barely understand. It's no surprise that some spiritual guides abandon their practice after unexplained episodes. Not everyone can handle what they see in the depths. Not everyone comes back the same. And maybe that's the point. Modern possession doesn't tear clothes, contort bodies, or spit blasphemies. It disguises itself as inner healing. And when the light that returns isn't the one they were expecting, it's already too late. Have you ever wondered about this? Share your thoughts in the comments. What if some possessions aren't chosen, but inherited? For centuries, scholars have tried to identify patterns behind why certain people seem more vulnerable to spiritual manifestations. Age, faith, emotional history, none of it offered a full explanation, but a forgotten line of research within traditional theology uncovered something unsettling. Possessions occurring along the same bloodline at consistent generational intervals. The most well-documented case took place in Hungary in the early 9th century, involving the Darvulia family. Official church records indicate that across 5 generations, one woman from the bloodline would experience signs of an anomalous spiritual awakening, always around the age of 33. No seizures, no hysteria, just radical shifts in behavior, nocturnal visions, fluency in extinct languages, and the same haunting phrase repeated each time, "Something inside me woke up." Investigations revealed that each of these women bore a small, dark, circular mark at the base of the neck, not genetic, but appearing spontaneously as the manifestations began. The Vatican sent emissaries. The village was quarantined, but one woman managed to document part of her experience in a journal before being taken. Her words, "I didn't see him, he didn't arrive from outside. He rose from within. He was always there, like inheritance, like a seed." This pattern repeats across other families around the world. In uncatalogued archives from the Archdiocese of Palermo, similar cases were found, especially among men labeled as keepers of the forbidden name. One such case involved Giulio Ferrante, who entered a trance-like state during a baptism ceremony. When he touched the water, he began reciting angelic names that appear only in the Book of Raziel, a hidden manuscript attributed to Enoch. Giulio was only 9 years old. He died in his sleep just weeks later, after writing in his own blood on his bedroom wall, "The seal will not hold forever." Why certain bodies? Why certain bloodlines? The most feared hypothesis within esoteric circles is this: some humans may carry fragments of the celestial rebellion, not just spiritually, but physically, as if certain bloodlines were marked in remote eras long before recorded history, with the task, or the burden, of guarding part of the rebel consciousness until a predetermined time. The Book of Jasher, banned from nearly all official compilations, mentions the broken nephesh, souls that, from their origin, were infused with a spark from a spirit that predates matter itself. The text suggests that these souls are not fully aware of their origin, but in moments of deep emotional or spiritual rupture, they break the seal and allow the return of what never truly left. If that's true, we're not dealing with random possessions, but with programmed returns. Specific bodies, specific families, marked for reasons still hidden, to carry the burden of a presence that was never defeated, only divided. In 1982, a French exorcist named Maurice Delacroix wrote a secret essay, which was confiscated by the Vatican just months later. In it he wrote, "The most feared possession is not the one that invades, but the one that awakens the dormant bloodline. When blood speaks, exorcism fails." That claim echoes what many ancient traditions have whispered for centuries. Blood carries memory, and some memories carry darkness not forgotten, just silenced. If the deepest possessions are inherited, then the question completely shifts. Are we possessed, or are we descendants of what once fell? Like this, if any part of this made you uncomfortable. What if since the day you were born, someone already knew you would be possessed? For centuries, while the church publicly performed exorcisms and fought against the idea of spiritual heredity, another force far more silent was moving in the shadows. In 2003, leaked documents from a former Vatican librarian revealed the existence of an unofficial order whose members wore no robes and never stood at altars. They were simply known as the Watchers. They didn't preach. They didn't write. They catalogued. Their sole mission was to monitor families marked by ancestral signs, inexplicable episodes, visions in dead languages, spiritual memory lapses, or any indication that the fallen spark might be close to awakening. They never used the word possession. They had another term, return manifestations. These agents rarely interfered except in extreme cases. When a manifestation risked crossing from private into public, the Watchers stepped in, silently, rarely with violence, more often with isolation, quiet disappearances, revised medical reports, or fabricated psychiatric diagnoses. The existence of this order appears in at least 3 unofficial sources. 1, the Protocols of Zion II, an expanded and heavily redacted version that mentions human entities guarding the seals of flesh. 2, the Dark Archives of Avignon, which include letters between popes and a covert group known as the Sentinels of the Sleeping Blood. 3, the Journals of Ana Silverio, a Brazilian psychologist and mystic who claimed she was being monitored after publishing a thesis on fragmented consciousness in European bloodlines. In every account, the Watchers are not portrayed as enemies, but they aren't protectors either. Their role is to maintain balance, to ensure that the return of the rebel consciousness, when it does happen, occurs far from the public eye, far from cameras, far from temples. They believe that some truths, if revealed without preparation, could fracture the very fabric of human reality. One of the strangest reports about the Watchers comes from an Italian woman, currently under protected identity, who claims she was visited by 2 men after her 12-year-old son entered a trance and accurately recited the names of fallen angels. The men wore no religious symbols, but carried coverless books and asked only one question: how long has he been hearing them? After that, they left behind an envelope containing 3 pages. The first was a partial genealogy of the family. The second contained an unknown symbol, something between an inverted star and a circle of fire. The third held a single phrase, written in red ink. When he speaks alone, listen very carefully. It may not be him. Nothing else was said. The boy disappeared months later during a trip with his father. The case was never solved. The mother was diagnosed with paranoid delusion. But before being institutionalized, she kept repeating the same thing. They don't fight demons. They guard those who carry what has fallen. The presence of these invisible agents raises deeper questions. Who authorized them? Who do they answer to? They don't report directly to the Vatican, nor to governments. They don't belong to the Freemasons, or to any known occult sects. They are something else, a parallel body, possibly formed by descendants of ancient initiates, or worse, by those who were once touched by the fallen spark and learned how to control it. The darkest theory among occult scholars is this: the Watchers don't just monitor the awakening of the possessed. They identify them from birth. Some names are marked in childhood. others before birth. And if it's true, if there really are secret archives containing the names of people who have never been possessed, but were predestined to be, how many are on that list? And who will be the next to awaken without knowing what lives inside them? Subscribe. The truth doesn't end here. What if no one recognizes possession anymore? Because it learned how to hide. In ancient accounts, possession was violent. Twisted bodies, guttural voices, inhuman screams. Evil had to be seen, feared, and cast out by force. But over time, that theater of horrors began to fade. Not because possession ended, but because it evolved. What was once obvious is now subtle. What once tore flesh now enters in silence. Modern exorcists report a shift in the behavior of manifestations. Instead of explosive outbursts, they're seeing cold, consistent behavioral patterns, strategically disguised as psychological traits. Lack of empathy, obsessive need for control, fascination with ancient symbols, uncanny ability to manipulate others emotionally. It's no longer about screaming in foreign tongues. The new possessed speaks calmly, but feels nothing. This mutation began showing up in psychiatric clinics in the 1990s. In confidential files, doctors described patients with above-average cognitive abilities. But they all had one thing in common. They claimed someone woke up inside them. One of the most chilling reports came from a hospital in Belgium, where a patient would say the same thing every morning upon waking. "I remember the sound of the fall, I'm coming back." The behavior began spreading. Psychologists started identifying individuals who didn't just claim to feel a presence within, they referred to it as part of their identity. Some called it the voice, others the watcher, and a few Hillel. What does this mean? It means we may be entering an era where possession no longer clashes with personality. It replaces it slowly. The returning spirit doesn't want to control the body by force. It wants to take over from within, quietly. A kind of spiritual infiltration that rewires values, unravels emotions, and reshapes beliefs, until the person no longer knows who they are nor wants to. Recent reports describe individuals who, after deep trauma, undergo total personality shifts, but without clinical symptoms. They're not delusional, they're functional and cold. When questioned, they say things like, "What I used to be no longer exists. I'm not alone. I know things I've never lived." These phrases echo a forgotten theory from classical demonology, reverse possession. In it, the spirit doesn't attack, it waits. It settles in quietly, growing as the individual lets go of themselves. Possession becomes the final stage of a spiritual erosion that can take years. And the most terrifying part? No screaming, no rituals, no deliverance. The person simply becomes someone else, and no one notices. This form of manifestation is extremely hard to detect. Classical exorcists aren't trained for it. Psychologists don't believe in it. Science doesn't name it. The church ignores it. But the symptoms are everywhere, and in many cases they're even praised. Highly charismatic people, persuasive speech, lack of fear, a fascination with darkness disguised as irony, an uncanny ability to sway the masses. Have you ever met someone like that? What if the newly possessed are the ones the world celebrates? What if modern possession is masked as success, charisma, and authenticity? Rebellion doesn't need armies anymore. It spreads through influence. And the new possession doesn't crave attention. It craves power. Tag someone who would dare to watch this until the end. And what if Lucifer never fell alone and never planned to return whole? For decades, scholars have wondered why spiritual manifestations attributed to Lucifer are so wildly inconsistent. In some, he appears as light. In others, as shadow. Sometimes a mentor, sometimes a destroyer. Always contradictory, always incomplete. But what if that confusion isn't a failure of perception, but a deliberate trait of his divided essence? In the hidden manuscripts of Nag Hammadi, there's a shocking theory. When Lucifer was cast out of heaven, he didn't simply fall. He was fragmented, not physically, but in essence, each part of his consciousness scattered into the fabric of humanity, as divine punishment or a silent plan for return. If this is true, there isn't just one person possessed by Lucifer. There are thousands each carrying a fragment. These fragments aren't whole. They act as incomplete minds, confused yet united by a single thread, a rejection of order, a fascination with the hidden, and a hunger for forbidden freedom. And the most disturbing part? Some of these fragments are waking up at the same time. Cases from different countries show identical behaviors in people with no connection to one another. In 2018, 5 teenagers on different continents began drawing the same symbols on their bedroom walls. None of them knew each other. In 2021, during the same week, 3 men told the media in their respective countries that a name awakened inside them. The same name, Hillel ben Shakar. And in 2024, a group of nuns in France entered a state of collective trance after chanting a song of unknown origin. When questioned, they said they had heard the sound of the beginning. What is happening? Independent researchers believe the fragments are resonating, like pieces of a mirror that, though shattered, still reflect the same face. And when these fragments begin to vibrate together, triggered by collective trauma, occult rituals, or even the casual misuse of spiritual practices, the greater body begins to take shape. This isn't about summoning Lucifer. It's about reconstructing him from within, through us. And this reconstruction happens quietly. It doesn't require cults or inverted churches. It only requires a spiritually sick system, one where everyone seeks power, but no one seeks truth. In that fertile ground, the fragments find space. They grow. They align, and when a critical mass of the possessed reaches the same frequency, the theory suggests that the lost core, the central consciousness, what remained of the original rebellion, could return to matter, but not as a being, as a living network, a collective body, a scattered mind. Lucifer, not as a person, but as a system. Rebellion would no longer be an event. It would become an atmosphere, invisible, embedded in culture, politics, spirituality, and human emotion. And no one would notice, because there would be no rituals, only behavior, only people growing more and more disconnected from the light, yet convinced they are awakening. And what if it's already happening? What if Lucifer has already returned, just in pieces? What if he already lives in millions and is just waiting for the final fragment to be awakened? If this disturbed you, that was the point. Leave a comment. And what if the greatest prison isn't the body, but the blindness we choose? We've reached the end of this hidden journey, where the shadows revealed the demonic possession is far more than an external attack. It's the awakening of an ancestral memory, a forgotten inheritance that pulses within us. Lucifer, fragmented and scattered, is no distant myth. He is a silent presence, an invisible shadow that moves through generations, lineages, and consciousness itself. What was once labeled as absolute evil condemnation was also the seed of an inner rebellion, an invitation to freedom, but a freedom that carries chaos in its wake. For centuries, men and women were hunted, silenced, exorcised, and yet the rebellious spark endured, not because evil won, but because it never truly left. Today, possession takes on subtle forms, invisible to the average eye. It lives in doubt, in unchecked desire, in the fractures that split the human soul. If Lucifer is a living system of divided consciousness, his return won't be a grand apocalyptic event. It will be quiet, a slow infiltration, a collective awakening that few will even recognize. And the final question that lingers deeper than any dogma is this: if this is the truth, if what we fear lives inside us, why are we still keeping our eyes closed? Why do we keep running from the shadow when it's part of who we are? Why do we deny what's awakening when it longs to be seen? What does it truly mean to be free? If freedom costs the awareness that a fallen spark dwells in our blood and in our souls, the real challenge ahead isn't about exorcism. It isn't a battle outside of us. It's an invitation to consciousness, to recognize what lives within, without fear, without rejection, but with the courage to face our own darkness. Because only those who see their shadow can truly choose to be light or to be part of the fall. And what if all of this is real? Write your truth below.